In the fog-choked shadows of Victorian London, a young governess wakes each night, screaming, haunted by a cloaked figure with a gleaming blade who whispers her name. Sherlock Holmes takes the case, uncovering a hidden passage, a tarnished past, and a vendetta rooted in betrayal. But when the truth unravels, the hunter becomes the hunted, and the girl's nightmares reveal a shocking secret her tormentor may be closer than anyone dares imagine. Will Holmes unmask the phantom before the blade strikes true? Chapter 1. The Cry in the Night. It was a bleak October evening in 1895, and London lay smothered beneath a fog so dense that the gas lamps of Baker Street flickered like distant stars, struggling against an encroaching void. Within the familiar confines of 2-to-1 I, Dr. John H. Watson, sat by a crackling fire. My medical journals spread before me, though my attention wandered. The air was heavy with the scent of damp wool and the faint taint of chemicals, for Sherlock Holmes, my friend and companion, was engrossed in one of his esoteric experiments at the cluttered table across the room. His lean figure, silhouetted against the glow of a Bunsen burner, moved with the precision of a machine, his long fingers manipulating vials and pipettes with an almost hypnotic grace. The silence, broken only by the occasional hiss of the flame or the soft ticking of the mantel clock, was one of those rare moments of domestic tranquility that I had come to cherish in our shared lodgings. Yet, as is often the case in the presence of Sherlock Holmes, such tranquility was but a prelude to disruption. At precisely 9:30, a sharp, insistent knock reverberated through the room, its urgency cutting through the fog-muffled stillness of the street below. Holmes's head snapped up, his grey eyes narrowing with that peculiar intensity that heralded the scent of a mystery. "A visitor at this hour, Watson," he remarked, his voice low and edged with anticipation. "Mark my words, this is no casual caller seeking a lost umbrella. The hour and the vigour of that knock bespeak a matter of some gravity." I rose, setting aside my journal, as Mrs. Hudson, our long-suffering landlady, ascended the stairs with a rustle of skirts. She opened the door to reveal a young woman, her appearance a stark contrast to the warmth of our sitting room. Miss Eleanor Grayson, as she would soon introduce herself, stood trembling on the threshold, her face pale as alabaster, her auburn hair tumbling in disarray beneath a hastily pinned bonnet. Her eyes, wide and dark with terror, darted about the room as if expecting some unseen menace to emerge from the shadows. Her gloved hands clutched a small reticule, the knuckles white with strain, and her breath came in short, uneven gasps. "Mr. Holmes," she said, her voice quivering yet resolute, "I am in desperate need of your assistance. I fear I am losing my mind, or worse, that some malevolent force pursues me. Each night I wake screaming, haunted by a vision so vivid it cannot be mere fancy, a cloaked figure, a glint of steel, and a voice that chills my very soul." Holmes gestured for her to sit, his movements deliberate, his expression one of keen interest, tempered by a studied calm. "Pray, be seated, Miss Grayson," he said, drawing a chair closer to the fire. "Compose yourself, and relate your story with precision. Omit no detail, however trivial it may seem, for in such minutiae often lies the key to truth." I took my accustomed place, notebook in hand, ready to record the particulars of what promised to be a singular case. Miss Grayson sank into the chair, her hands trembling as she removed her gloves, revealing fingers slender and unadorned save for a single silver ring etched with a delicate floral pattern. She drew a deep breath, as if steeling herself against the weight of her own words. "I am a governess," she began, "lately employed by the Marwood family in Kensington. My life has been one of quiet routine, teaching the children, managing their lessons, and attending to the small duties of my station. I am an orphan, raised in Devon, with no family or connections to speak of. My existence, until 3 weeks ago, was unremarkable, even dull. But then the nightmares began." Holmes leaned forward, his fingers steepled beneath his chin, his eyes fixed upon her with an intensity that seemed to pierce through the veil of her distress. "Describe these nightmares," he said. "Every sensation, every image, no matter how fleeting." Miss Grayson's gaze dropped to the floor, as if the act of recounting her visions summoned them anew. "They come at midnight, always at the stroke of the hour, as if some unseen clock governs their arrival. I see a figure tall, cloaked in black, his face obscured by shadow. He stands at the foot of my bed, motionless, yet his presence is like a weight upon my chest. In his hand he holds a bladed dagger, perhaps, or a knife its edge, catching the moonlight with a cold, sinister gleam. He speaks my name, Eleanor, in a voice low and venomous, as if it were a curse. Each night the vision grows clearer, the voice more distinct, as if he draws nearer to me, not in dream but in reality." Her words faltered, and she pressed a hand to her brow, her face contorted with fear. I wake screaming, my heart pounding, my room unchanged. The door is locked, the window secure, yet I cannot shake the sense that he has been there, that he is real. I have tried laudanum prayer, every remedy I know, but nothing avails. I fear I am going mad, Mr. Holmes, or that some enemy I cannot name seeks to destroy me." Holmes's expression remained impassive, but I could see the spark of curiosity. In his eyes, that relentless hunger for the puzzle that lay at the heart of every human drama. "And you have no enemies?" he asked. "No suitors, no rivals, no one who might wish you harm?" "None," she replied firmly. "My life is solitary. The Marwoods are kind, if distant. Sir Reginald is stern but fair. Lady Clara is frail and keeps to herself, and the children, 2 girls, Beatrice and Amelia, are obedient, if somewhat reserved. I have no cause to suspect anyone in the household, nor have I crossed paths with anyone who might bear me ill will." Holmes rose, pacing slowly before the fire, his hands clasped behind his back. "An unremarkable life, you say, yet one now marked by terror. Curious, tell me of the Marwood household. Describe its members, its routines, its atmosphere." Miss Grayson hesitated, as if weighing her words. "The house is grand, an old mansion in Kensington, its walls heavy with ivy and history. Sir Reginald Marwood, a retired colonel, is a man of rigid habits, much given to discipline. He served in India for many years and returned with a considerable fortune, though he speaks little of his time there. Lady Clara is delicate, often confined to her rooms, her health undermined by some unspoken ailment. The children are well-mannered but quiet, as if some shadow hangs over them. The staffer, butler, Hargreaves, a cook, and 2 maids are efficient but guarded. The house feels heavy, Mr. Holmes, as if it holds secrets it will not yield." Holmes paused, his gaze fixed on the flickering flames. "And your room, where is it situated, and what is its condition?" "It is a modest chamber on the 2nd floor, overlooking the garden. A bed, a wardrobe, a small table with my books, nothing out of the ordinary. The window is high, the latch secure, and the door has a sturdy lock, which I use every night." Holmes's lips twitched in the faintest of smiles. Nothing out of the ordinary, yet a cloaked figure haunts your sleep. Watson, what do you make of it? I cleared my throat, aware of the inadequacy of my deductions in the face of Holmes's scrutiny. It sounds like a case of nervous exhaustion, perhaps, or a vivid imagination fueled by the isolation of her position. Yet the consistency of the vision suggests something more. Deliberate, deliberate, Holmes echoed, his tone thoughtful. A word well chosen, Watson. Miss Grayson, have you noticed anything unusual in the house sounds? Objects out of place, visitors at odd hours? She frowned, her fingers twisting the fabric of her reticule. There was one thing, though I thought little of it at the time. 2 nights ago, as I prepared for bed, I heard a faint scraping sound, like wood against wood, coming from the wall near my bed. I thought it might be mice, but it was too regular, too purposeful. I found nothing when I looked, and it did not. Come again. Holmes's eyes gleamed. Purposeful. Excellent. Miss Grayson, I shall require your permission to visit the Marwood household at once. Watson, fetch your coat and revolver. This matter demands immediate investigation. I hesitated, glancing at the clock. At this hour, Holmes. The fog is thick, and Kensington is a fair distance. Precisely, he replied, already donning his overcoat. The fog is our ally, cloaking our movements. If there is a malevolent force at work, it will not expect us tonight. Come, Watson, the game is afoot. Miss Grayson rose, her face a mixture of relief and apprehension. You believe me, then? You think this is not madness? Holmes fixed her with a steady gaze. Madness, Miss Grayson, is a convenient label for those who lack the imagination to see beyond it. Your fear is real, and its source is tangible. We shall find it. The journey to Kensington was a somber affair, the cab rattling through streets shrouded in a yellow-grey haze. Miss Grayson sat opposite us, her hands clasped tightly, her eyes fixed on the window as if searching for the phantom of her nightmares. Holmes, as was his wont, remained silent, his mind no doubt racing through a labyrinth of possibilities. I, too, was lost in thought, pondering the nature of a terror that could manifest so vividly, yet leave no trace. The Marwood mansion emerged from the fog like a spectre itself, its tall windows glowing faintly, its silhouette imposing against the clouded sky. A footman admitted us, his expression one of surprise at our late arrival. Sir Reginald Marwood awaited us in the drawing-room, a tall, broad-shouldered man with a face weathered by years in the tropics. His grey hair was cropped close, his moustache meticulously trimmed, and his eyes held a glint of impatience as he rose to greet us. Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson, he said, his voice clipped. Miss Grayson has spoken of her troubles. I trust you will put an end to this nonsense. Her screams disturb my children and unsettle the household. I have little patience for hysterics. Holmes inclined his head, his expression neutral. I assure you, Sir Reginald, I approach this matter with the utmost seriousness. May I see Miss Grayson's room? Sir Reginald's jaw tightened, but he nodded. Hargreaves will show you. I expect results, Mr. Holmes. The butler, Hargreaves, a gaunt man with a perpetually furrowed brow, led us up a grand staircase adorned with portraits of stern-faced ancestors. Miss Grayson's room was as she had described, modest, orderly, with a single bed, a wardrobe, and a small table bearing a few well-worn books, Scott, Dickens, and a volume of poetry. The window, high and narrow, overlooked a garden shrouded in fog, its roses barely discernible in the gloom. Holmes moved with the precision of a bloodhound, his eyes scanning every surface. He knelt by the bed, his fingers tracing the floorboards, pausing at a faint scratch near the base of the wall. "Observe, Watson," he said, his voice low. "This mark is recent, no more than a week old. It is not the work of furniture, nor of any casual accident. It suggests movement something heavy, perhaps dragged or shifted." I peered at the scratch, a thin, irregular line etched into the polished wood. "A hidden panel, perhaps," I suggested. Holmes's lips curled slightly. "Your imagination improves, Watson. We shall see." He turned to Miss Grayson, who hovered by the door, her face pale. "This scraping sound you heard, describe its rhythm, its duration." "It was brief," she said, frowning. "Perhaps 5 or 6 seconds, steady, like someone sliding something along the wall. It came from there." She pointed to the wall opposite the window, where a small bookcase stood. Holmes approached the bookcase, running his fingers along its edges. He paused, pressing lightly, and a faint click sounded. To my astonishment, the bookcase swung inward, revealing a narrow passage, its walls damp and lined with cobwebs. Holmes lit a match, its flame casting eerie shadows. "A relic of older times," he said. "Many such houses conceal passages for servants or escape. This, however, has been used." Recently, he stepped inside, beckoning me to follow. The passage was cramped, its air stale, and it descended to a small landing before branching in 2 directions, one toward the attic, the other toward the ground floor. Holmes examined the dust on the floor, noting faint footprints, too indistinct to identify. "Someone has been here," he murmured, "and not long ago." We returned to the room where Miss Grayson stood, her eyes wide with shock. "I had no idea," she whispered. "What does it mean, Mr. Holmes?" "It means," he replied, "that your nightmares may have a more earthly origin than you suppose. We shall remain here tonight, with your permission. Watson, you will take the first watch. I have preparations to make." As midnight approached, the house grew silent, its creaks and groans amplified by the stillness. I sat in a chair by Miss Grayson's bed, my revolver at hand, while Holmes prowled the passage, his movements silent as a cat's. Miss Grayson, exhausted, fell into a fitful sleep, her breathing uneven. The clock struck 12, and a chill seemed to settle over the room. Suddenly, a piercing scream tore through the silence, and Miss Grayson sat bolt upright, her eyes wild, her hands clutching the bedclothes. "He was here," she gasped. The cloaked figure, he stood there, by the window, his blade gleaming. I rushed to her side, checking the window and door, both locked, undisturbed. Holmes emerged from the passage, his face grim. "Nothing," he said. "No sign of intrusion, yet the terror is real. Watson, note the time and her exact words. This is no mere dream." We calmed Miss Grayson, who trembled violently, her face buried in her hands. Holmes's eyes were alight with that fierce determination I knew so well. "Tomorrow," he said, "we shall unravel this thread. Miss Grayson, you are not mad, nor are you alone. Someone seeks to torment you, and I shall discover who and why." As we prepared to leave, Holmes paused by the bookcase, his fingers brushing. "The hidden catch. A house of secrets," he murmured, "and a mind under siege. The game, Watson, is well and truly afoot." The fog had thickened as we stepped into the night, the Marwood mansion fading into the mist behind us. Holmes was silent, his mind no doubt racing through the myriad clues we had uncovered. A scratch, a passage, a scream in the dark. I knew better than to interrupt his thoughts, but as we climbed into the cab, I could not help but wonder what strange forces were at play in the life of Eleanor Grayson, the girl who woke up screaming. Chapter 2. The Marwood Mansion. The fog that had cloaked our journey to Kensington the previous night lingered into the morning, casting a pall over the Marwood Mansion as our cab rattled to a halt before its imposing gates. The house stood like a sentinel amidst its manicured lawns, its ivy-clad facade betraying no hint of the unease that had drawn us here. Sherlock Holmes, his sharp features set in a mask of quiet determination, stepped down from the cab with an air of purpose, his long coat billowing slightly in the damp breeze. I followed, my medical bag in hand, my mind still turning over the events of the previous night, Miss Eleanor Grayson's scream, the hidden passage, and the faint scratch on the floor that had so intrigued my friend. As we approached the heavy oak door, it swung open to reveal Hargreaves, the butler, his gaunt face etched with a mixture of deference and wariness. "Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson," he said, his voice low and measured. "Sir Reginald awaits you in the drawing room. Miss Grayson is with the children, as is her duty." Holmes nodded curtly, his eyes already scanning the entrance hall, a cavernous space, adorned with dark wood paneling, a crystal chandelier dulled by dust, and a grand staircase curving upward into shadow. The air carried a faint mustiness, as if the house, for all its grandeur, had not been fully aired in years. "Lead on, Hargreaves," Holmes said, his tone betraying nothing of the keen observation I knew was at work. Sir Reginald Marwood stood by the drawing-room's fireplace, his broad shoulders squared, his hands clasped behind his back in a posture that spoke of military discipline. His face, weathered by years under an Indian sun, was stern, his grey eyes narrowing as we entered. Beside him stood Lady Clara Marwood, a fragile figure in a high-necked gown, her pale hands folded in her lap, her expression one of quiet resignation. The two Marwood daughters, Beatrice and Amelia, sat primly on a velvet settee, their faces pale and their eyes downcast, as if the weight of the household's atmosphere pressed upon them. "Mr. Holmes," Sir Reginald began, his voice clipped, "I trust you have come to put an end to this nonsense about Miss Grayson's dreams. My household cannot abide such disturbances. The children are unsettled, and my wife," he glanced at Lady Clara, who flinched almost imperceptibly, "is not in robust health." Holmes inclined his head, his gaze sweeping the room before settling on Sir Reginald. "I assure you, sir, I am here to uncover the truth, whatever its nature. Miss Grayson's distress is no mere fancy, and I intend to ascertain its cause. May I speak with her and inspect her quarters further?" Sir Reginald's jaw tightened, but he gestured toward the door. "She is in the schoolroom with the children. Hargreaves will take you." The schoolroom, situated on the first floor, was a bright contrast to the somber hall below. Its tall windows admitted what little light the fog permitted, illuminating a space filled with books, maps, and a chalkboard scrawled with sums. Miss Grayson stood at the board, her auburn hair neatly pinned, though her face bore the pallor of sleeplessness. Beatrice and Amelia, seated at a small table, looked up as we entered, their expressions guarded but curious. Miss Grayson turned, her eyes widening slightly at the sight of Holmes. "Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson," she said, her voice steady despite the strain in her features. "I did not expect you so soon." "The matter is urgent," Holmes replied, his tone gentle but firm. I wish to examine your room again, and to speak with you privately. The children may continue their lessons under Dr. Watson's supervision for the moment." I nodded, taking a seat near the girls, who exchanged a glance but said nothing. Holmes and Miss Grayson departed, leaving me to observe the two young Marwoods. Beatrice, the elder at 12, had a sharp, inquisitive look, her dark eyes darting toward the door as if eager to overhear. Amelia, younger by 2 years, clutched a pencil tightly, her knuckles white. I attempted to engage them, asking about their studies, but their responses were curt, their attention clearly elsewhere. "You've heard Miss Grayson's screams, I take it," I ventured, keeping my tone light. Beatrice nodded, her lips pursed. "They wake us sometimes. She sounds frightened." Amelia's voice was barely a whisper. "It's like a ghost, Papa says. But I don't believe in ghosts." I smiled, hoping to reassure her. "Nor do I, Miss Amelia. There's always an explanation. And Mr. Holmes will find it." Meanwhile, Holmes led Miss Grayson back to her modest chamber, a room I had seen briefly the previous night. It was unchanged. A single bed with a plain counterpane, a wardrobe of dark oak, a small table bearing a few books, and a high window overlooking the garden, now shrouded in mist. Holmes moved with purpose, his eyes sweeping every surface before, settling on the scratch near the bed that had caught his attention before. "Miss Grayson," he said, kneeling to inspect the mark, "you mentioned a scraping sound 2 nights ago. Was it precisely here?" He pointed to the wall beside the bed, where the bookcase stood. "Yes," she replied, her voice low. "It came from that wall, near the bookcase. I thought it might be a rodent, but it was too deliberate, too heavy." Holmes ran his fingers along the bookcase's edge, his movements precise. He pressed a panel, and with a soft click, the bookcase swung inward, revealing the same narrow passage we had discovered the previous night. Miss Grayson gasped, stepping back. "I had no notion such a thing existed," she said, her hand pressed to her chest. Holmes lit a small lantern from his coat pocket, its beam cutting through the gloom of the passage. "This house is old, Miss Grayson," he said. "Such passages are not uncommon in residences of this age, built for servants or to conceal Catholic priests during the Reformation. But this one has been used recently. Observe." He pointed to the floor, where faint smudges in the dust suggested recent passage. Though the prints were too indistinct to identify, he led the way into the passage, its walls damp and lined with cobwebs that clung to my coat as I followed. The air was stale, heavy with the scent of mold and neglect. The passage descended to a landing, where it branched, one path leading upward to the attic, the other downward toward the ground floor. Holmes paused, his lantern illuminating a small pile of debris splinters of wood and a single, tarnished button, its surface etched with a faint crest. "Curious," Holmes murmured, pocketing the button. "This is no servant's trinket. The crest suggests a military origin, possibly regimental." We emerged back into the room, where Miss Grayson stood, her face a mixture of fear and fascination. "What does it mean, Mr. Holmes?" she asked. "Is someone using this passage to torment me?" Holmes's eyes narrowed. "It is too early to conclude, but the evidence suggests intent. Someone has access to this passage, and they know of your presence here. Tell me, have you noticed anything else out of place? Objects moved, sounds beyond the scraping?" She hesitated, her brow furrowing. "Yesterday, as I dressed, I found one of my hairpins on the floor near the window. I am certain I left it on." The table, it was bent, as if it had been stepped on. Holmes crossed to the window, examining the latch and sill. The window was high, its frame secure, but he paused, his fingers tracing a faint smudge on the glass mark, so slight I would have overlooked it. Not dirt, he said, but wax, as if a candle had been held close. Someone has been here, Watson, and not by chance. We returned to the drawing room, where Sir Reginald awaited, his impatience palpable. Well, Mr. Holmes, he demanded, have you found the source of this foolishness? Holmes's expression was unreadable. I have found indications, Sir Reginald, that Miss Grayson's distress is not without cause. I require access to the grounds and permission to question your staff. Sir Reginald's eyes flashed. Question my staff. This is a respectable household, sir. I will not have it disrupted by wild theories. Respectable households, Holmes replied coolly, often conceal the most singular secrets. I shall be discreet, but I must insist. Lady Clara spoke for the first time, her voice soft but strained. Let him do his work, Reginald. If Miss Grayson is truly in danger, we cannot ignore it. Sir Reginald relented with a grunt, and Holmes wasted no time. He beckoned Hargreaves, who lingered by the door, and questioned him sharply. Have you seen strangers about the estate, Hargreaves? Visitors at odd hours, or signs of intrusion? The butler's face remained impassive, but his eyes flickered toward the garden. None, sir, he said. The grounds are secure, and we keep a tight watch. Holmes's gaze lingered on him, as if weighing his words. Very well, Watson, we shall inspect the garden. The garden, bordered by high walls and dense shrubbery, was a maze of rose bushes and gravel paths, its beauty dimmed by the fog. Holmes moved with the precision of a hunter, his eyes scanning the ground. Near the base of Miss Grayson's window, he paused, kneeling to examine a patch of earth. Here, Watson, he said, pointing to a faint indentation, a footprint, partially obscured by the gardener's work. It is narrow, suggesting a woman or a small man, and the heel is worn unevenly, a sign of haste or agitation. He rose, his gaze sweeping upward to the window. The wax on the sill, the footprint, the hairpin, these are not coincidences. Someone has been observing Miss Grayson, perhaps entering her room, and they are skilled enough to leave little trace. As we returned to the house, Holmes's face was set in a grim line. This is no phantom, Watson, he said. Miss Grayson is the target of a deliberate campaign, though its purpose remains unclear. We must watch closely, for I fear the next move will be bolder. We rejoined Miss Grayson in the schoolroom, where she had resumed her lessons. The children, sensing the tension, were subdued, their eyes following Holmes with a mixture of awe and apprehension. Miss Grayson, Holmes said, you must remain vigilant. Lock your door tonight, and place this by your bedside. He handed her a small bell, its chime sharp and clear. If you hear anything, ring it. We shall be near. As we prepared to depart, Holmes paused by the drawing room, where Lady Clara sat alone, her hands twisting a delicate handkerchief. Lady Clara, he said softly, if there is anything you know, anything you fear, speak now. The truth will serve Miss Grayson better than silence. Her eyes met his, haunted and weary. I know nothing, Mr. Holmes, she said, her voice barely audible, but I pray you find what haunts her for this house. It feels heavier each day. Holmes nodded, his expression unreadable. As we stepped into the fog once more, he murmured, a house of secrets, Watson, and a family bound by them. The threads are converging, but the pattern is not yet clear. Tomorrow, we dig deeper. Chapter 3. The Garden's Secret. The morning following our visit to the Marwood mansion dawned with a persistent drizzle. The fog of the previous days giving way to a grey, oppressive dampness that clung to the skin. Sherlock Holmes, undeterred by the weather, was already at work when I descended to our sitting room at 2-1B Baker Street. His lean form bent over a magnifying glass as he examined the tarnished button we had found in the hidden passage. The fire crackled softly, casting a warm glow over the clutter of papers, chemical vials, and the ever-present tobacco ash that marked his restless mind. "Watson," he said without looking up, "this button is no mere trifle. The crest a lion, rampant crossed by a sword, that of the 17th Bengal Lancers, a regiment in which Sir Reginald Marwood served during his time in India. Its presence in the passage suggests a connection to his past, one he has not seen fit to disclose." I took my seat, intrigued but cautious. Could it belong to a servant, perhaps, or a visitor with ties to the regiment? Holmes's eyes flicked up, a faint smile playing at his lips. "Possible, but unlikely. The button is worn, its threads frayed, indicating it was torn free in haste or struggle. No servant would possess such an item, and visitors do not typically skulk through hidden passages. No, Watson, this is a clue to something deeper thread we must follow." Our breakfast was interrupted by the arrival of a telegram from Miss Eleanor Grayson. Its contents brief but urgent. "Screams again last night. Bell rang. No one found. Please come." Holmes's expression hardened as he read it aloud. "The game advances," he said, folding the paper. "Fetch your coat, Watson. We return to Kensington at once." The Marwood mansion, under the grey veil of rain, appeared even more foreboding than before, its ivy glistening wetly, its windows dark and uninviting. Hargreaves admitted us with his usual reserve, though I noted a faint tremor in his hands as he took our coats. "Miss Grayson is in the library," he said. "She is shaken, sir, but unharmed." We found Miss Grayson seated by a tall window, a book unopened in her lap, her face pale and drawn. The library was a grand room, its walls lined with leather-bound volumes, its air heavy with the scent of old paper and polished wood. She rose as we entered, her eyes shadowed with exhaustion. "Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson," she said, her voice low. "It happened again last night. The figure, the cloaked man with the blade. I saw him at the foot of my bed, clearer than ever. I rang the bell you gave me, but when the household came, there was nothing, no sign of anyone." Holmes's gaze was piercing. "Describe the figure this time." "Every detail, Miss Grayson, for the devil lies in them." She shuddered, wrapping her arms about herself. He was tall, as before, cloaked in black, his face still hidden, but sharper, somehow, as if the shadows parted slightly. The blade gleamed, and his voice, it was deeper, more menacing. He said, "Eleanor, the debt must be paid." I woke screaming, and the bell was in my hand, ringing wildly. Holmes nodded, his fingers drumming lightly on the arm of a chair, and the household's response. "Sir Reginald was furious," she said. "He called it hysteria, said I was upsetting the children. Lady Clara was kinder, but she seemed frightened, as if she knew more than she would say. The staff searched the room, but found nothing. The door was locked, the window secure." Holmes's eyes narrowed. "The passage, Watson. We must examine it again, but first, the garden. The footprint you noted yesterday may yield further clues in this rain." We descended to the garden, a sodden expanse of gravel paths and rose bushes, the earth softened by the drizzle. Holmes moved with purpose to the spot beneath Miss Grayson's window, where the faint indentation of a footprint had caught his attention. The rain had blurred its edges, but Holmes knelt, shielding the ground with his coat. "See here," he said, pointing to a small, glinting object half buried in the mud. With care, he extracted a silver hairpin, its tip bent and its surface etched. "With the initials LM, a woman's hairpin," I remarked. "And those initials, could they belong to Lady Clara Marwood?" Holmes's lips twitched. "A natural assumption, Watson, but we must not leap to conclusions. The initials are suggestive, but the pin's condition bent. Tarnished implies it was dropped in haste, perhaps discarded deliberately. It is no coincidence that it lies beneath Miss Grayson's window." He pocketed the hairpin and rose, his gaze sweeping the garden. The high walls, topped with iron spikes, offered no easy access, yet Holmes's eyes lingered on a narrow gate, half hidden by overgrown ivy. He strode to it, examining the lacquer, sturdy mechanism, recently oiled. "This gate is used more often than Sir Reginald might admit," he said. "The oil is fresh, the hinges free of rust. Someone comes and goes." In secret, we returned to the house, where Holmes requested to see Lady Clara alone. She received us in a small parlour, her frail form wrapped in a shawl, her eyes darting nervously as Holmes produced the hairpin. "Do you recognize this, Lady Clara?" he asked, his tone neutral but probing. Her fingers tightened on her shawl, and for a moment I thought she might faint. It could be mine," she said, her voice barely audible. "I have many such pins, but I cannot be certain. Why do you ask?" Holmes's gaze was unrelenting. "Because it was found beneath Miss Grayson's window, and it bears your initials. If it is not yours, then someone wishes it to appear so. Have you enemies, Lady Clara, or secrets that might invite such subterfuge?" Her face paled further, and she shook her head. "I know of no enemies, Mr. Holmes. My life is quiet, confined to this house. My health—" She trailed off, her eyes dropping to her hands. Holmes did not press further, but his silence was more eloquent than words. As we left the parlour, he murmured, "She knows more than she admits, Watson, but fear binds her tongue. We must look elsewhere." For answers, our next stop was the hidden passage, accessed once more through the bookcase in Miss Grayson's room. Holmes lit his lantern, its beam revealing the same damp walls and dusty floor. He paused at the landing, where the passage branched, and knelt to examine the dust. "The footprints are fresher now," he said, "and more distinct. A man's boot, size 9, with a worn heel." And here he pointed to a faint smudge of wax, similar to that found on the windowsill. "Our intruder is careless or confident." The passage to the attic led to a low, cluttered space filled with crates and cobwebs. Holmes's lantern swept the shadows, pausing on a small, locked chest tucked beneath a rafter. With a deft movement, he picked the lock, revealing a bundle of letters tied with faded ribbon and a small, tarnished locket. The letters, written in a bold hand, bore the signature LM, and spoke of betrayal and loss, addressed to a Captain Laurence Mortimer. The locket contained a miniature portrait of a young woman, her features strikingly similar to Miss Grayson's. Holmes's eyes gleamed. "Laurence Mortimer," he said, "a name from Sir Reginald's past in India, I wager. And these letters suggest a connection to Miss Grayson herself. Watson, we are on the cusp of something extraordinary." We returned to the library where Miss Grayson awaited, her anxiety palpable. Holmes showed her the locket, watching her reaction closely. "Do you recognize this woman?" he asked. She shook her head, her fingers trembling as she touched the locket. "No, but there is something familiar about her. I cannot say what." Holmes pocketed the locket and letters. "We shall uncover the truth, Miss Grayson. For now, remain vigilant. Watson and I will return tonight. If your tormentor strikes again, we shall be ready." As we stepped into the rain-soaked street, Holmes's face was alight with the thrill of the chase. "The threads tighten, Watson," he said. "A button, a hairpin, a locket, all pointing to a past that refuses to stay buried. Someone in this house saw, beyond it knows more than they admit, and they are playing a dangerous game." Chapter 4. Echoes of India. The drizzle had hardened into a steady rain by the time Sherlock Holmes and I returned to Baker Street, the Marwood mansion's secrets weighing heavily upon us. The sitting room at 221B was a haven of warmth, its fire casting long shadows across the familiar clutter of books, papers, and chemical apparatus. Holmes, however, was in no mood for repose. He flung his sodden coat over a chair and set to work at once, spreading the letters from the attic chest across his desk, his magnifying glass poised like a hawk over prey. The tarnished button and silver hairpin rested beside the locket there, mute testimony adding to the growing tapestry of the case. "Watson," he said, his voice sharp with focus, "these letters are a window into a past that Sir Reginald Marwood would prefer forgotten. Observe the hand, bold, educated, yet tinged with urgency. They are written by a woman named Lillian Mortimer, addressing her brother, Captain Laurence Mortimer, a man whose name is tied to Marwood's time in India. The tone speaks of betrayal, of promises broken, and a vow of retribution." I leaned over his shoulder, reading a fragment of one letter. "You trusted him, Lawrence, and he has undone us both. The regiment's honor lies in tatters, and I shall not rest until justice is served." The signature LM matched the initials on the hairpin. "A sister seeking justice for her brother," I mused. "But how does this connect to Miss Grayson's nightmares?" Holmes's eyes gleamed. "That, Watson, is the crux of the matter. The locket's portrait bears a striking resemblance to Miss Grayson, suggesting a familial type, perhaps a daughter, hidden or unknown. We must trace Mortimer's fate and Marwood's role in it. To the British Library, Watson. The records of the 17th Bengal Lancers will not lie." The library, a vast repository of knowledge, was hushed despite the bustle of scholars beneath its domed ceiling. Holmes, armed with the regiment's name and the year 1875, pored over dusty dispatches and military rolls, his fingers moving with the precision of a surgeon. I assisted, though my role was largely to fetch volumes and marvel at his relentless focus. After hours of searching, we uncovered a thin file marked Confidential, Calcutta, 1875. Within it lay the story of Captain Laurence Mortimer, an officer of promise who had accused Colonel Reginald Marwood of embezzling regimental funds. The accusations were dismissed, Mortimer vanished under mysterious circumstances, and Marwood returned to England a wealthy man, his reputation intact. "Vanished," I said, frowning. "Dead, perhaps, or disgraced and fled." Holmes's lips curled slightly. "The official report claims he deserted, but the timing is suspicious. Mortimer's accusations threatened Marwood's career, yet no investigation followed. A scandal was buried, Watson, and with it, perhaps, a man." Lillian Mortimer's letters suggest she believed her brother was wronged, possibly murdered. Glanced at the locket, its miniature portrait haunting in its clarity, and Miss Grayson. Could she be Mortimer's daughter, raised in ignorance of her heritage? A plausible hypothesis, Holmes replied, but we lack proof. Her orphanage in Devon may hold answers. We shall telegraph the matron at once. But first, we return to Kensington. The household must be pressed for truth, and I suspect Lady Clara knows more than she has admitted. The Marwood mansion, under the rain's relentless assault, seemed to hunker down, its windows like eyes watching our approach. Hargreaves, ever the silent sentinel, admitted us, his face betraying a flicker of unease as Holmes's gaze lingered on him. We were shown to the drawing-room, where Sir Reginald stood by the fire. His posture rigid, his expression one of barely concealed irritation. "Mr. Holmes," he said, his voice clipped. "I grow weary of this intrusion. Miss Grayson's fancies are her own affair. I will not have my household turned upside down over a governess's nightmares." Holmes's tone was cool, unyielding. "Your household, Sir Reginald, harbours secrets that threaten more than Miss Grayson's peace. I have evidence, linking her distress to your time in India, specifically to a Captain Laurence Mortimer. His name is not unknown to you, I presume." Sir Reginald's face darkened, his hands clenching at his sides. "Mortimer was a fool and a traitor," he snapped. "He accused me of theft, slandered my name, and then fled like a coward. His sister spread lies, but they came to nothing. I will not have this dredged up in my own home." Lady Clara, seated nearby, gasped softly, her hands twisting her handkerchief. Holmes turned to her, his eyes piercing. "And you, Lady Clara, what do you know of Lillian Mortimer?" Her face drained of colour, her voice barely a whisper. "She was a friend, long ago, in Calcutta. She was heartbroken when Laurence disappeared. She blamed Reginald, but I never believed her. She died soon after, or so I heard." Holmes's gaze did not waver. "Died, or was believed to have died. The distinction is critical, madam. A hairpin bearing her initials was found beneath Miss Grayson's window, and letters in her hand were discovered in your attic. These are not the relics of a dead woman." Lady Clara's eyes widened, and she swayed as if struck. Sir Reginald stepped forward, his voice sharp. "Enough, Holmes. You overstep. If you have accusations, make them plainly, or leave my house." Holmes's smile was thin, dangerous. "I accuse no one yet, but I will have the truth, Sir Reginald, and neither your rank nor your temper will obstruct me. Watson, we shall speak. With Miss Grayson, we found her in the schoolroom, the children dismissed for the day. She sat by the window, her face pale, her hands clasped tightly. "Mr. Holmes," she said, rising. I heard raised voices. "Is something amiss?" Holmes produced the locket, opening it to reveal the portrait. "This was found in the attic, Miss Grayson. Do you recognize the woman?" She studied it, her brow furrowing. "There is a familiarity, but I cannot place it. I was raised in an orphanage, Mr. Holmes. I have no memory of family." Holmes nodded, pocketing the locket. "We shall send a telegram to the orphanage in Devon, inquiring into your origins. In the meantime, I must ask you to remain here, but take no unnecessary risks. Someone in this house saw beyond it, is orchestrating your fear, and they may grow bolder." As we prepared to leave, Holmes paused by the library, where a portrait of Sir Reginald in his regimental uniform hung above the mantel. The crest on his epaulets matched the button from the passage. "A link to India," Holmes murmured, "and a past that refuses to stay silent. Watson, tonight we watch the house from without. If our quarry moves, we shall be ready." We stepped into the rain, the mansion looming behind us like a puzzle half solved. Holmes's mind was a furnace, burning through the closed button. The hairpin, the letters, the locket, all pointing to a vendetta rooted in a distant land. As we climbed into the cab, he leaned back, his eyes distant. "The past is a shadow, Watson, and it falls heavily on this house. We must tread carefully, for the next step may bring us face to face with its maker." Chapter 5. The hidden passage. The rain had ceased by dusk, leaving behind a clammy chill that seeped into the bones as Sherlock Holmes and I took up our vigil outside the Marwood mansion. We concealed ourselves in a copse of elms across from the garden gate, the darkness and lingering mist our allies in this silent watch. Holmes, his eyes fixed on the shadowed outline of the house, was a study in stillness, his mind no doubt weaving the threads of Evans' button, hairpin, locket, and letters into a coherent pattern. I, less accustomed to such nocturnal vigils, shifted uncomfortably, my revolver a cold weight in my coat pocket. "Patience, Watson," Holmes murmured, his voice barely audible. "Our quarry moves under cover of night, and we shall catch them unawares. The passage in Miss Grayson's room is the key. Its recent use suggests an intruder with intimate knowledge of the house." The hours crept by, the mansion's windows glowing faintly, then dimming as the household retired. At 11:30, a flicker of movement caught Holmes's ajar shadow, fleeting and deliberate, near the garden gate. He tensed, his hands signaling me to remain silent. The gate creaked open, revealing a figure cloaked in black, moving with stealth toward the house. Holmes sprang forward, silent as a panther, and I followed. My heart pounding. The figure paused beneath Miss Grayson's window, producing a small tulagemi. Perhaps sand began to work at the latch. Holmes was upon them in an instant, seizing their wrist. "Enough," he said, his voice low and commanding. "Your game is up." To our astonishment, the figure was not a man but a woman, her face partially obscured by a hood. She struggled briefly, then went still, her eyes blazing with defiance. Holmes pulled back the hood, revealing features sharp and weathered, with a striking resemblance to the locket's portrait. "Lillian Mortimer," he said, his tone certain. "Or do you go by another name now?" The woman's lips curled into a bitter smile. "You are as clever as they say, Mr. Holmes. Yes, I am Lillian Mortimer, and I have returned to see justice done. Before we could question her further, a sharp scream echoed from the house. Miss Grayson's voice, unmistakable in its terror. Holmes thrust the woman toward me. "Hold her, Watson. Do not let her escape." He sprinted toward the mansion, disappearing through the garden gate. I gripped Lillian's arm, her strength surprising for her slight frame. "What have you done to Miss Grayson?" I demanded. She laughed, a low, bitter sound. "Nothing she does not deserve, Doctor. She is the daughter of my disgrace, the child of my brother's ruin. Marwood will pay for what he did, through her if need be." Her words chilled me, but duty called me to the house. I secured her wrists with my handkerchief, makeshift restraint, and hurried after Holmes, dragging her along. We entered through the servants' door, the house in uproar. Hargreaves and a maid stood in the hall, their faces pale, while Sir Reginald's voice boomed from above, demanding order. We reached Miss Grayson's room to find Holmes already there, the bookcase swung open to reveal the hidden passage. Miss Grayson sat on her bed, trembling. The bell Holmes had given her clutched in her hand. "He was here," she gasped, the cloaked figure clearer than ever. He spoke of a debt of blood for blood. Holmes's eyes swept the room, noting the undisturbed lock and window. "Yet no one entered by conventional means," he said. He turned to Lillian, still in my grasp. "Explain yourself, madam. How have you orchestrated this terror?" Lillian's defiance faltered under Holmes's gaze. "The passage," she said. "I found it years ago when I served as a companion to Lady Clara in India. I returned to England, biding my time, and learned my daughter Eleanor was here, in Marwood's employ. I used a phonograph, hidden in the passage, to play recordings of a voice, a blade scrape, to drive her to fear. I meant to unsettle Marwood, to make him feel the weight of his sins." Miss Grayson's eyes widened. "Your daughter?" "I am an orphan, madam. I have no mother." Lillian's face softened, a flicker of pain crossing it. "You were taken from me, Eleanor. After Laurence's death, I was broken, unable to keep you. The orphanage in Devon was my only choice. But I never forgot, and when I found you here, I saw my chance to strike at Marwood." Holmes's voice was cold. "Your vengeance has harmed an innocent, madame. Your recordings, your nocturnal visits, these are the work of a cunning mind, but a cruel one." Sir Reginald burst into the room, his face livid. "What is this madness? Lillian Mortimer, I thought you dead. Would that I were," she spat. "You ruined my brother Reginald, and left me to rot. I will see you suffer yet." Holmes raised a hand. "Enough, Sir Reginald. You will answer for your part in Mortimer's disgrace. Miss Mortimer, you will face the law for your actions here. Watson, summon the police. This house's secrets are laid bare." As I left to fetch a constable, Miss Grayson's voice followed me, soft and broken. "Is it true, Mr. Holmes? Is she my mother?" Holmes's tone was gentle, a rare softness. "The truth, Miss Grayson, is often painful, but it is yours to claim. We shall verify her story, but for now, rest. Your nightmare is over." The police arrived swiftly, and Lillian Mortimer was taken into custody, her defiance giving way to a weary resignation. Holmes and I returned to Baker Street as dawn broke, the rain-washed streets gleaming under a tentative sun. He sat by the fire, his violin idle, his eyes distant. "A mother's vengeance, Watson," he mused, "twisted into cruelty against her own child. The human heart is a labyrinth, and this case has plumbed its depths." I nodded, my pen poised over my notebook. "And Sir Reginald, will he face justice?" Holmes's smile was grim. "The past has a way of catching up, Watson. His role in Mortimer's ruin will not remain buried. But for now, Miss Grayson is free of her terror, and that is victory." Enough. Chapter 6. The Ghostly Whisperer. Pale light of dawn barely penetrated the heavy curtains of 2-1B Baker Street as Sherlock Holmes and I sat in our familiar quarters. The events of the previous night casting a somber pall over our breakfast. The arrest of Lillian Mortimer had brought a temporary resolution to Miss Eleanor Grayson's torment, but the air was thick with unanswered questions. Holmes, his sharp features drawn with the intensity of thought, sipped his coffee in silence, his eyes fixed on the locket and letters spread before him on the table. The miniature portrait of Lillian, so like Miss Grayson in its delicate features, seemed to gaze back at us, a mute witness to a tragedy spanning decades. "Watson," Holmes said at last, breaking the stillness, We have unmasked the architect of Miss Grayson's nightmares, but the deeper currents of this affair remain murky. Lillian Mortimer's vendetta against Sir Reginald Marwood is clear, yet her methods, sophisticated, calculated, suggest a mind honed by more than mere grief, and the question of Miss Grayson's parentage demands further scrutiny. We must return to Kensington, for I suspect the Marwood household holds yet more secrets. I nodded, my mind still reeling from Lillian's revelation that Miss Grayson was her daughter. Do you believe her claim, Holmes, that Miss Grayson is indeed her child, taken from her after Captain Mortimer's disgrace? Holmes's gaze was piercing. Belief is irrelevant, Watson. Facts alone will suffice. The orphanage records in Devon must be examined, and Sir Reginald's role in Mortimer's ruin requires closer investigation. His denial was too vehement, his anger too raw. There is guilt in him, though its precise nature eludes me. We set out for Kensington under a sky still heavy with clouds, the streets slick with the remnants of the night's rain. The mansion loomed as forbidding as ever, its ivy-clad walls seeming to absorb the light rather than reflect it. Hargreaves, the butler, admitted us with a deference that bordered on unease, his eyes avoiding Holmes's as he led us to the drawing room. Sir Reginald was absent, attending to business in the city, but Lady Clara awaited us, her frail form wrapped in a shawl, her hands trembling slightly as she greeted us. "Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson," she said, her voice soft but strained. "I heard of last night's events. That woman, Lillian Mortimer's, she truly the cause of Miss Grayson's distress?" Holmes's expression was unreadable. "She is, Lady Clara, though her motives are tangled in the past you shared in India. Tell me, what do you recall of Lillian Mortimer's life after her brother's disappearance?" Lady Clara's eyes dropped to her hands, her fingers twisting the edge of her shawl. She was distraught, consumed by grief and anger. She believed Reginald had wronged Laurence, that he had driven him to ruin or worse. She left Calcutta soon after, and I heard she had died of fever. I never saw her again until now. Holmes leaned forward, his voice low and deliberate. "And did you know she had a child? A daughter, perhaps, given up in her despair?" Lady Clara's face paled, and for a moment I thought she might faint. "A child," she whispered. "No, I knew nothing of that. Lillian was proud, secretive. She would not have shared such a thing, even with me." Holmes's gaze did not waver. Yet someone in this house knew enough to guide her to Miss Grayson. The passage, the phonograph, these required knowledge of the mansion's secrets. "Who among your staff has been with you since India?" She hesitated, her lips parting as if to speak, then closing again. "Hargreaves," she said at last. "He was our steward in Calcutta, loyal to Reginald. He came with us when we returned to England." Holmes nodded, filing the information away. "Thank you, Lady Clara. We shall speak with Miss Grayson now." We found Miss Grayson in the schoolroom, her face drawn but resolute as she guided Beatrice and Amelia through a geography lesson. The children, sensing the tension, were subdued, their eyes flicking toward us with curiosity. Holmes dismissed them gently, and they scurried off, leaving us alone with Miss Grayson. "Miss Grayson," Holmes began, producing the locket. "Lillian Mortimer claims you are her daughter, taken from her after her brother's ruin. Have you any memory, however faint, of your early years before the orphanage?" She shook her head, her fingers tracing the locket's edge. "None, Mr. Holmes. I was told I was left at the orphanage as an infant, with no name or history. This woman in the portrait, she could be anyone. Yet, she paused, her brow furrowing. There is something in her eyes, a sadness I feel, I know, though I cannot say why. Holmes's voice was gentle but firm. We shall send a telegram to the orphanage today, inquiring into your origins. In the meantime, I must ask you to remain here, but take every precaution. Lillian's arrest may not end this affair. Someone aided her, and they may yet act. Miss Grayson nodded, her expression resolute. I will be careful, Mr. Holmes. But if she is my mother, what does she want of me? Why torment me so? Holmes's eyes darkened. Her target was Sir Reginald, but her methods ensnared you. Grief and vengeance make poor counselors, Miss Grayson. We shall uncover the full truth. We left the schoolroom and descended to the servants' quarters, where Holmes sought out Hargreaves. The butler, polishing silver in a small pantry, looked up with a start as we entered. Mr. Holmes, he said, his voice steady but his hands betraying a slight tremor. How may I serve you? Holmes's tone was sharp. You served the Marwoods in India, Hargreaves. What do you know of Captain Laurence Mortimer and his sister, Lillian? Hargreaves's face remained impassive, but his eyes flickered. I knew them, sir, as part of the regiment's circle. Captain Mortimer was a fine officer until he made those accusations against the colonel. Miss Lillian was fierce, always defending. Her brother, after he vanished, she left Calcutta. I heard no more of her, and the passage in Miss Grayson's room. Holmes pressed. You have been with this household long enough to know its secrets. Did you aid Lillian Mortimer in her scheme? Hargreaves's composure cracked, his hands clenching the cloth he held. I swear, sir, I knew nothing of her presence until last night. I heard noises in the walls once or twice, but I thought them rats. This house is old, full of creaks and whispers. Holmes's gaze was unrelenting. And yet you said nothing. Fear, Hargreaves, or complicity? The butler's shoulders sagged. Fear, sir. I feared losing my place. The colonel is not a forgiving man. Holmes dismissed him with a wave, his expression thoughtful. Fear binds many tongues, Watson, he said as we stepped into the hall. But Hargreaves knows more than he admits. We must watch him closely. As we prepared to leave, Holmes paused by the garden gate, his eyes scanning the ground. He knelt, retrieving a small scrap of cloth caught on a thorn of black fabric, torn and damp. From our intruder's cloak, perhaps, he said, pocketing it. The net tightens, Watson. Tonight, we return to Baker Street to await the orphanages. Reply. Tomorrow, we unravel the threads of India's shadow. The cab ride back was silent, Holmes lost in thought, his fingers drumming a restless rhythm. The mansion's secrets, Lillian's vengeance, Miss Grayson's parentage, Sir Reginald's past were converging, but the final piece of the puzzle remained elusive. As we reached Baker Street, Holmes's voice broke the silence. This is no ordinary case, Watson. It is a tragedy of loyalty and betrayal, and we are not yet at its end. Chapter 7. The Butler's Tale. The morning light filtered dimly through the fog-stained windows of 2-1B Baker Street, casting a pallid glow over the cluttered sitting room where Sherlock Holmes and I sat in contemplation. The telegram from the Devon orphanage had arrived at dawn, its contents both illuminating and perplexing. Eleanor Grayson, admitted 1876, infant, no known parents. Left with a silver ring, floral design, no further records. The ring, which Miss Grayson had worn during our first meeting, lay now on Holmes's desk beside the locket and letters. Its delicate pattern, a silent link to the mystery of her origins. Holmes. His lean frame coiled with restless energy, paced before the fire, his eyes darting between the artifacts. "The ring confirms a connection to Lillian Mortimer," he said, his voice low and precise. "Its design matches the locket's engraving, a floral motif, uncommon and distinctive. Yet the orphanage's lack of detail suggests a deliberate effort to obscure Miss Grayson's parentage. Someone wished her past to remain hidden, Watson, and I suspect Sir Reginald Marwood knows more than he admits." I stirred my tea, my mind grappling with the tangled threads of the case. Lillian's vendetta explains the nightmares, but why target her own daughter? And what of Hargreaves? His fear yesterday was palpable. "Do you think he's complicit?" Holmes's lips curled into a faint smile. "Hargreaves is a man caught between loyalty and dread, Watson. His long service to the Marwoods binds him, but his evasions betray knowledge he dares not share. We must press him further, for he is the linchpin of this household's secrets. To Kensington, Watson, and let us waste no time." The Marwood mansion greeted us with its customary air of brooding silence, the rain having given way to a damp, oppressive mist that clung to the ivy-clad walls. Hargreaves admitted us, his gaunt face betraying a flicker of apprehension as Holmes's piercing gaze met his. "Sir Reginald is in his study," he said, his voice steady but strained. "Miss Grayson is with the children, and Lady Clara rests upstairs. We shall speak with you first, Hargreaves," Holmes said, his tone brooking no refusal. "In private, if you please." The butler led us to a small pantry off the servants' quarters, its shelves lined with gleaming silver and neatly stacked linens. The air was heavy with the scent of polish and starch, a stark contrast to the tension in Hargreaves's posture as he stood, his hands clasped tightly before him. Holmes wasted no time, producing the scrap of black cloth from the garden thorn. "This was found near the gate, Hargreaves," he said, his voice sharp. "It matches the cloak worn by Lillian Mortimer. You claimed to know nothing of her presence, yet you admitted to hearing noises in the walls. Speak plainly, Marwood, have you seen?" Hargreaves's composure faltered, his eyes darting to the cloth. "I swear, sir, I knew nothing of Miss Lillian's return until you caught her. The noises, I thought them the house settling, or perhaps a trespasser. I saw a shadow once, near the garden gate, cloaked as you describe, but I did not dare investigate. The Colonel, he does not tolerate interference." Holmes's gaze was unrelenting. "And what of Captain Laurence Mortimer?" "You served in India, Hargreaves. You knew him, and his sister. What secrets do you keep from that time?" The butler's face paled, his hands trembling. "Captain Mortimer was a good man, sir, but reckless. He accused the Colonel of embezzling funds, regimental money meant for supplies. The accusations were dismissed, and Mortimer vanished. Some said he deserted, others whispered darker things. Miss Lillian was wild with grief, blaming the Colonel. She left soon after, and I heard she died. I never thought to see her again." Holmes leaned closer, his voice low and commanding. "And the passage in Miss Grayson's room? You have been with this household since India. Did you know of its existence?" Hargreaves hesitated, his eyes dropping to the floor. "I knew of it, sir. The house is old, built with such passages for servants or concealment. I never thought it used, not until the noises began. I should have spoken, but the Colonel," he broke off, his voice choked with fear. "Fear of Sir Reginald binds you," Holmes said, his tone cold. Yet your silence has endangered Miss Grayson. If you know more, speak now, or the consequences will be yours to bear." Hargreaves shook his head, his voice barely audible. "I know. Nothing more, Mr. Holmes. I swear it on my life." Holmes dismissed him with a curt nod, his expression thoughtful. "He speaks the truth, Watson, but only part of it. His fear of Marwood is genuine, but he has seen more than he admits. We must tread carefully." We proceeded to the schoolroom, where Miss Grayson was guiding Beatrice and Amelia through a history lesson. The children, as ever, were subdued, their eyes flicking toward us with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. Holmes dismissed them gently, and they scurried off, leaving us alone with Miss Grayson. "Miss Grayson," Holmes said, producing the telegram from the orphanage, "we have confirmation that you were left in Devon as an infant, with a silver ring matching the locket's design. Lillian Mortimer's claim that you are her daughter grows stronger. Have you recalled anything further, any fragment of memory that might aid us?" She shook her head, her fingers tracing the ring on her hand. "Nothing, Mr. Holmes. My earliest memories are of the orphanage, of cold rooms and strict matrons. If she is my mother, why would she torment me so?" Holmes's eyes softened, a rare flicker of compassion. Her target was Sir Reginald, Miss Grayson, but her grief twisted her actions into cruelty. "We shall verify her story, but for now, you must remain vigilant. The passage is secure, but I shall rig a trap tonight, a thread across its entrance, dusted with powder to detect any intruder." We left the schoolroom and descended to the study, where Sir Reginald awaited, his face a mask of barely contained fury. "Holmes," he said, rising from his desk, "I hear you've questioned my butler and accused my household of conspiracy. This is intolerable. Lillian Mortimer is in custo. Let that be an end to it." Holmes's voice was icy. "Lillian Mortimer acted with aid, Sir Reginald. The passage, the phonograph, these required knowledge of your house. Someone within these walls, or closely tied to them, facilitated her scheme. Your past in India casts a long shadow, and I will not rest until it is fully illuminated." Sir Reginald's hands clenched, but he said nothing, his silence more telling than words. As we left the study, Holmes murmured, "He is cornered, Watson, and men like Marwood grow dangerous when pressed. Tonight, we watch from within. The truth is near, but it will not come easily." We returned to Baker Street to prepare, Holmes rigging a small device, fine thread, and a vial of chalk dust to place in the passage. As evening fell, we set out once more, the weight of the case pressing upon us. The mansion's secrets were unraveling, but the final thread, Marwood's guilt, Hargreaves's role, and Miss Grayson's true heritage remained just out of reach. Holmes's eyes gleamed with the thrill of the chase. "The game is closing, Watson," he said. "Tonight, we shall see who dares to move in the dark." Chapter 8. The trap is set. The twilight shadows deepened over Kensington as Sherlock Holmes and I returned to the Marwood mansion, the air thick with the damp chill of an autumn evening. The house loomed before us, its darkened windows like eyes, guarding secrets yet to be unveiled. Holmes carried a small satchel, within which lay his carefully prepared trapper fine silk thread, a vial of chalk dust, and a small mechanism of his own design to detect intrusion in the hidden passage. His face, illuminated by the faint glow of a street lamp, was set with the quiet intensity of a hunter closing in on his quarry. "Watson," he said, as we approached the garden gate, "tonight we test the limits of our adversary's boldness. Lillian Mortimer's arrest has disrupted their plans, but I suspect the true architect of this scheme remains at large. The thread will tell us if the passage is used, and by whom. We were admitted by Hargreaves, whose gaunt features betrayed a growing unease, his eyes flickering toward the shadows as if expecting some unseen threat. "Miss Grayson is in her room," he said, his voice low. "Sir Reginald and Lady Clara are in the drawing room. They have instructed that you be given full access, Mr. Holmes, though the Colonel is displeased." Holmes's lips twitched in a faint smile. "Displeasure is often the companion of guilt, Hargreaves. Lead us to Miss Grayson's room." The governess's chamber was as we had left it, its modest furnishings unchanged, save for the lingering weight of fear that seemed to permeate the air. Miss Eleanor Grayson sat by the small table, her auburn hair neatly pinned, though her face bore the strain of sleepless nights. She rose as we entered, her hands clasped tightly, the silver ring glinting on her finger. "Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson," she said, her voice steady but tinged with apprehension. "Have you learned more of this woman who claims to be my mother?" Holmes set his satchel on the bed, his movements precise. "The evidence supports Lillian Mortimer's claim, Miss Grayson, but we await final confirmation from the orphanage. For now, we focus on ensuring your safety. I shall rig a device in the passage to detect any intruder. You must lock your door and keep the bell I gave you close. If you hear anything, ring it at once." She nodded, her eyes searching his face. "And if the figure returns, the cloaked man in my dreams?" Holmes's gaze was steady. "He is no phantom, Miss Grayson, but a creation of human design. We shall unmask him tonight." With practiced efficiency, Holmes opened the bookcase, revealing the hidden passage. He strung the silk thread across the entrance at ankle height, dusting it lightly with chalk powder to mark any disturbance. A small mechanical device, a spring-loaded lever of his own invention, was concealed beneath the floorboards, designed to trigger a faint click if the thread was broken. "If anyone enters," he said, "we shall know, and we shall be waiting." We descended to the drawing room, where Sir Reginald and Lady Clara sat in strained silence. The Colonel's face was a mask of barely contained anger, his hands gripping the arms of his chair. Lady Clara, pale and fragile, avoided our eyes, her fingers twisting a lace handkerchief. Holmes addressed them with his customary directness. "Sir Reginald, Lady Clara, I must inform you that a trap has been set in the passage. If an intruder moves tonight, they will be detected. I advise you to instruct your staff to avoid Miss Grayson's room." Sir Reginald's eyes flashed. "This is outrageous, Holmes. You treat my home as a battlefield, accusing my household without proof. Lillian Mortimer is in custody. Let that suffice." Holmes's voice was cold. Lillian Mortimer had aid, Sir Reginald. The passage, the phonograph, the precise targeting of Miss Grayson, these required knowledge only an insider could provide. "If you wish this matter resolved, you will cooperate." Lady Clara spoke, her voice barely audible. "Please, Reginald, let Mr. Holmes do his work. For Eleanor's sake." The Colonel relented with a grunt, and we took our leave, stationing ourselves in a small parlour across the hall from Miss Grayson's room. The house settled into an uneasy quiet, the ticking of a grandfather clock the only sound as midnight approached. Holmes sat motionless, his eyes fixed on the door, his senses attuned to the slightest disturbance. I, less accustomed to such vigils, gripped my revolver, my nerves taut with anticipation. At the stroke of midnight, a faint click echoed from the passage, followed by the sharp chime of Miss Grayson's bell. Holmes was on his feet in an instant, his lantern casting a beam as we rushed to her room. The door was locked, but Holmes produced a key procured earlier from Hargreaves' we burst inside. Miss Grayson stood by her bed, trembling, the bell in her hand. "He was here," she gasped. The cloaked figure at the foot of my bed, his blade gleaming. I rang the bell, and he vanished. Holmes crossed to the bookcase, his lantern revealing the thread broken, its chalk dust scattered on the floor. The lever had triggered, confirming an intruder's passage. They moved swiftly, he said, his voice grim. Watson checked the window and door. Both were secure, the latch undisturbed, the room empty save for us. Holmes entered the passage, his lantern sweeping the shadows. At the landing, he paused, noting fresh footprints in the dusterman's boot, size 9, with a worn heel, matching those he had observed before. "Our quarry is bold," he murmured, but careless. We followed the passage to the attic, where a faint scuff mark led to a narrow window, its latch forced open. Holmes peered out, noting the roof's gentle slope and the garden below. They escaped. "This way," he said, a practiced move, suggesting familiarity with the house. Returning to Miss Grayson, Holmes questioned her closely. The figure's words, were they the same? She nodded, her voice shaking. He said, "Eleanor, the debt must be paid." His voice was deeper, more real than before, as if he stood closer. Holmes's eyes narrowed. A man, not Lillian's recording. Someone else moves in her stead, continuing her work. "Watson, we must search the grounds at once." We descended to the garden, the mist curling around us like a living thing. Holmes's lantern swept the earth, revealing a fresh footprint near the gate, matching the one from the passage. A glint in the grass caught his eye, small brass key, its surface etched with a faint crest. "Another relic," Holmes said, pocketing it. "This key is old, likely to a servant's entrance or a forgotten lock. Our intruder is no stranger to this estate." As we returned to the house, Sir Reginald met us, his face livid. "What is this commotion?" Miss Grayson screams again. "I demand an explanation, Holmes." Holmes held up the key, his voice cold. "An intruder entered your house tonight, Sir Reginald, through a passage you claimed to know nothing of. This key, dropped in their haste, suggests a connection to your household. Who has access to such relics?" Sir Reginald's anger faltered, his eyes flickering to the key. I know nothing of it. This house is old, full of forgotten things." Holmes's smile was thin. "Forgotten, perhaps, but not unused. We shall return tomorrow, Sir Reginald. Until then, ensure Miss Grayson's safety, or I shall hold you accountable." As we left the mansion, the weight of the night's events pressed upon me. Holmes, however, was alight with the thrill of the chase. "The net tightens, Watson," he said, his voice low. "A second player moves in the shadows, and they are close to the heart of this house." Chapter 9. The twist of identity. The faint glow of dawn barely pierced the heavy curtains of 2-1B Baker Street as Sherlock Holmes and I sat in our sitting room. The events of the previous night's vigil at the Marwood mansion casting a restless shadow over our morning. The brass key, retrieved from the garden, lay on the table beside the locket, letters, and other relics of the case, its etched crystalline and sword gleaming faintly in the firelight. Holmes, his lean frame taut, with concentration, examined the key through his magnifying glass, his eyes narrowing as he traced its contours. "Watson," he said, his voice low and precise, This key is no mere servant's tool. The crest matches that of the 17th Bengal Lancers, linking it to Sir Reginald's past in India. Its presence in the garden, dropped in haste, suggests our intruder is not only familiar with the mansion, but tied to its history. We are dealing with a vendetta that spans decades, and Miss Grayson is its unwitting pawn. I stirred my coffee, my mind grappling with the complexity of the affair. Lillian Mortimer's role is clear, but this second intruder, a man, by the footprints, complicates matters. Could it be Hargreaves, despite his denials, or someone else from Marwood's past? Holmes's lips twitched in a faint smile. Hargreaves is a creature of fear, Watson, not cunning. His knowledge of the passage makes him suspect, but his demeanor lacks the boldness of our cloaked figure. No, we seek another man with motive and opportunity. Perhaps a survivor of the scandal that ruined Captain Laurence Mortimer. A telegram arrived as we spoke, its contents from the Devon orphanage, responding to Holmes's earlier inquiry. He read it aloud. Eleanor Grayson, admitted, 1876, infant. Left with silver ring and a letter, unsigned, requesting anonymity. No further details. Holmes set the paper down, his eyes gleaming. The letter is key, Watson. Someone likely Lillian. Mortimer sought to erase Eleanor's identity. We must uncover why, and who else knew of her existence. We set out for Kensington, the morning mist clinging to the streets like a shroud. The Marwood mansion, its ivy glistening with dew, seemed to pulse with secrets as we approached. Hargreaves admitted us, his face more haggard than before, his eyes darting nervously as he led us to the drawing room. Sir Reginald was absent, but Lady Clara awaited, her frail form wrapped in a shawl, her hands trembling as she greeted us. "Mr. Holmes," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "I heard of last night's intrusion. Is Miss Grayson safe?" "For now," Holmes replied, his tone measured. "But the danger persists, Lady Clara." A man entered her room through the passage, leaving this. He produced the brass key, watching her reaction closely. "It bears the crest of the 17th Bengal Lancers. What can you tell me of it?" Her eyes widened, and she swayed slightly, clutching the arm of her chair. I have seen such keys in Reginald's study, relics from his service, but I know nothing of their use. Please, Mr. Holmes, this house grows darker each day." Holmes's gaze was unrelenting. Darkness thrives on silence. "Lady Clara, if you know of anyone from your time in India, someone connected to Laurence or Lillian Mortimer, speak now." She shook her head, her voice breaking. There was no one else, only whispers of Lawrence's disgrace. "I beg you, protect Eleanor." We left her and sought Miss Grayson in the schoolroom, where she stood before a map, her face pale but composed. The children were absent, sent to their rooms at Holmes's request. He showed her the key, noting her lack of recognition. "Miss Grayson," he said, "the orphanage confirms you were left with a ring and a letter requesting anonymity. Lillian Mortimer's claim that you are her daughter grows stronger, but another hand moves against you, a man, bold and cunning. Have you noticed any stranger about the estate?" She frowned, her fingers tracing the ring on her hand. "No, Mr. Holmes, but yesterday, as I walked in the garden, I felt watched. There was no one, yet the air felt heavy, as if eyes followed me." Holmes nodded, his mind racing. "We shall set another trap tonight, but first, I must speak with Sir Reginald. His past holds the key to this mystery." We found the Colonel in his study, a room lined with military trophies and maps of India. His face was thunderous as he rose, slamming a fist on his desk. "Holmes, this is insufferable. You pry into my past, harass my staff, and now produce trinkets. To accuse me, I demand you leave." Holmes held up the key, his voice cold. "This was dropped by an intruder last night, Sir Reginald, bearing your regiment's crest. Your denial of knowledge grows less convincing. What happened to Laurence Mortimer, and why does his shadow haunt this house?" Sir Reginald's face flushed, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of fear. Mortimer was a liar and a deserter. His accusations were baseless, and he fled to avoid court-martial. "I owe you no further explanation." Holmes's smile was thin. "You owe the truth, sir, to Miss Grayson. If not to me, we shall return tonight, and I advise you to secure your household door. I shall do it for you." As we left the study, Holmes paused by a portrait of Sir Reginald in his regimental uniform, the same crest gleaming on his epaulettes. "He lies, Watson," he murmured. "His fear betrays him. We must prepare for tonight's vigil, for our intruder will not rest." Back at Baker Street, Holmes rigged a new trapper, finer thread, dusted with a luminescent powder, visible only under his lantern's special lens. "If they move tonight," he said, "we shall have them." As we set out for Kensington, the weight of the case pressed upon Lillian's vengeance. Miss Grayson's hidden past, and a second figure lurking in the shadows. Holmes's eyes gleamed with anticipation. "The truth is near, Watson," he said. "Tonight, we unmask the ghost in the passage." Chapter 10. The Motive Revealed. Night air was sharp with the scent of damp earth as Sherlock Holmes and I took up our vigil within the Marwood mansion, concealed in the small parlour across from Miss Eleanor Grayson's room. The house was steeped in an oppressive silence, broken only by the distant creak of settling timbers and the faint ticking of a clock in the hall. Holmes, his lean form a shadow in the dim light of our shaded lantern, sat with the patience of a predator, his eyes fixed on the door leading to the governess's chamber. The trap he had set, a luminescent threaded snare in the hidden passage, was primed to catch our elusive intruder, whose identity and purpose remained tantalizingly out of reach. "Watson," Holmes whispered, his voice barely audible, "the key with the regimental crest points to a man tied to Sir Reginald's past. Someone bold enough to risk discovery, yet cunning enough to evade us thus far. Tonight we shall have our answer, for the pattern of these nightly visitations suggests a purpose beyond mere terror." I gripped my revolver, my nerves taut as the minutes crept toward midnight. The weight of the case, the locket, the letters, the hairpin, and now the brass key pressed upon me. Each clue a fragment of a puzzle that seemed to circle back to the shadowed history of India. Miss Grayson's connection to Lillian Mortimer, confirmed by the orphanage's telegram, added a layer of tragedy to the affair. But the second intruder, a man by the evidence of the footprints, hinted at a deeper conspiracy. At the stroke of midnight, the sharp chime of Miss Grayson's bell shattered the silence, followed by a muffled cry. Holmes was on his feet in an instant, his lantern casting a ghostly glow as we rushed to her room. The door was locked, but Holmes's key turned smoothly, and we burst inside to find Miss Grayson standing by her bed, her face ashen, the bell clutched in her trembling hand. "He was here," she gasped, her voice quaking. The cloaked figure, clearer than ever, his blade raised as if to strike. He spoke of a debt of justice for the past. Holmes crossed to the bookcase, his lantern revealing the trap thread broken. Luminescent powder scattered across the floor. "They moved again," he said, his tone grim, swift and silent, but not swift enough. He entered the passage, his light sweeping the damp walls, and I followed, leaving Miss Grayson to recover under the watchful eye of a maid summoned by the commotion. The passage was as we had left it, but the footprints size 9, with a worn heel were fresher, leading to the attic. Holmes paused at the landing, noting a faint smudge of wax on the wall, identical to that found on Miss Grayson's windowsill. "Our intruder is consistent," he murmured, "but their purpose grows bolder." This was no mere scare. In the attic, the narrow window we had noted before stood ajar, its latch forced. Holmes peered out, his lantern illuminating the roof slope and the garden below. A faint scrape in the dust revealed where the intruder had climbed out, but no further clues remained. "They are practiced," Holmes said, "but not infallible. Watson, we must search the house, every room, every corner." We descended to the main floor, where Sir Reginald met us, his face livid with rage. "Holmes, this is madness," he bellowed. "Another intrusion. I will have my staff search the grounds at once." Holmes's voice was cold. "Your staff, Sir Reginald, may include the culprit. I require access to your study now." The Colonel's protests faltered under Holmes's unrelenting gaze, and he led us to his study, a room heavy with the relics of his military past. Maps of India adorned the walls, and a locked cabinet stood in the corner, its brass fittings gleaming. Holmes produced the key from the garden, holding it up. "This crest matches your regiment, Sir Reginald. Does it open this cabinet?" Sir Reginald's face drained of colour, but he nodded, his hands trembling as he took the key and unlocked the cabinet. Inside were papers, ledgers, letters, and a small journal, its pages yellowed with age. Holmes seized the journal, flipping through it with rapid precision. "These are accounts from Calcutta, 1875, he said, his voice sharp. "They detail transactions, regimental funds diverted to private accounts." Captain Laurence Mortimer's accusations were true, were they not? Sir Reginald sank into a chair, his defiance crumbling. I did what I had to," he stammered. "The regiment was in chaos, funds mismanaged. I took what was owed me, nothing more. Mortimer threatened to expose me, so I ensured his silence." Holmes's eyes narrowed. "Ensured his silence? Speak plainly, sir." "He was court-martialed in secret," Sir Reginald said, his voice hollow, "disgraced, exiled. I thought him gone, dead by his own hand. Lillian blamed me, but I never harmed him directly." Holmes closed the journal, his expression grim. "And yet his sister's vengeance has haunted your house through your governess. Miss Grayson is Lillian's daughter, a fact you may not have known, but which someone used to torment you." Sir Reginald's eyes widened. "Eleanor, Lillian's child. I had no idea." Holmes turned to me. "Watson, fetch Miss Grayson. She must hear this." We brought Miss Grayson to the study, her face pale but resolute. Holmes recounted Sir Reginald's confession, sparing no detail. "Your mother sought to punish him through you," he said, "but another hander, man has continued her work. We shall find him." As we left the study, Holmes paused, his eyes scanning the room. A faint glint beneath a rug caught his attention, a small brass button, identical to the one from the passage. "Another clue," he said, pocketing it. "The net tightens, Watson. Tomorrow we pursue the second intruder, for he is the key to this affair's resolution." We left Miss Grayson under Lady Clara's care, the household in disarray as the truth of Sir Reginald's past unravelled. Holmes's face was alight with the thrill of the chase as we stepped into the night. "A debt of blood and honor, Watson," he said. "The past has claimed its due, but we shall ensure it claims no more." Chapter 11. The reckoning. The morning air in Baker Street carried a crisp edge, the remnants of the previous night's mist lingering as a faint haze over London. Within the familiar chaos of 2-1B, Sherlock Holmes sat by the fire, his violin resting, idle on his knee, his sharp eyes fixed on the brass button retrieved from Sir Reginald Marwood's study. The journal, locket, and other relics of the case lay scattered on the table, each a silent testament to the unraveling mystery. I, Dr. John H. Watson, sipped my tea, my mind heavy with the revelations of Sir Reginald's confession and the elusive second intruder who continued to haunt Miss Eleanor Grayson's nights. "Watson," Holmes said, his voice cutting through the morning's quiet, "the button confirms our suspicions. It matches the one from the passage, both bearing the crest of the 17th Bengal Lancers. Our intruder is no phantom, but a man tied to Marwood's past, one who moves with purpose and knowledge of the mansion's secrets. Sir Reginald's admission of embezzlement and Mortimer's disgrace provides the motive, but the identity of this second player remains just beyond our grasp." Set down my cup, my thoughts racing. Could it be another officer from the regiment? Perhaps. Someone loyal to Captain Mortimer, seeking to continue Lillian's vendetta. Holmes's eyes gleamed. "A sound hypothesis, Watson, but we must not assume. The footprints, the boldness of entering the house, despite Lillian's arrest, these suggest a personal stake, not mere loyalty. We return to Kensington today, for the final thread lies within that household, and I intend to pull it loose." We arrived at the Marwood mansion under a sky threatening further rain, its grey expanse mirroring the tension within. Hargreaves admitted us, his gaunt face etched with exhaustion, his hands trembling as he took our coats. "Sir Reginald is in the library," he said, his voice low. "Miss Grayson is with the children, and Lady Clara remains in her rooms." Holmes's gaze lingered on the butler. "You will join us shortly, Hargreaves. Your knowledge of this house's secrets is no longer in doubt." We found Sir Reginald in the library, surrounded by shelves of leather-bound volumes, his face haggard as he rose to greet us. "Holmes," he said, his voice weary but defiant, "I have told you all I know of Mortimer. What more do you want of me?" Holmes produced the brass button, holding it up to the light. "This was found in your study, Sir Reginald, matching one from the passage used to torment Miss Grayson. It bears your regiment's crest. Who else in this household has ties to the 17th Bengal Lancers?" Sir Reginald's eyes widened, his hand gripping the edge of a table. "No one," he said, his voice strained. "The staff are local, save Hargreaves, who was with me in India, but never served in the regiment. You accuse without evidence, Holmes." Holmes's smile was cold. "Evidence accumulates, sir. Summon Hargreaves." The butler entered, his posture rigid, his eyes avoiding Holmes's piercing stare. "Hargreaves," Holmes began, his tone sharp. "You admitted to knowing the passage's existence and hearing noises within it. You served the Marwoods in India, privy to their secrets. Did you know Captain Laurence Mortimer, and have you aided another in continuing his sister's vengeance?" Hargreaves's face paled, his hands clenching. "I knew Captain Mortimer, sir, as a steward knows an officer. He was kind, but his accusations against the colonel ruined him. I swear I've aided no one. The noises, I thought them nothing until you came." Holmes leaned closer, his voice low and commanding. And yet you saw a cloaked figure in the garden, heard sounds in the walls, and said nothing. Why, Hargreaves? Fear or complicity? The butler's resolve cracked, his voice trembling. Fear, Mr. Holmes. The colonel's temper is fierce, and I've seen what happens to those who cross him. I saw a man once, near the gate, cloaked, but I dared not speak. I thought him a thief, not this. Holmes's eyes narrowed. Describe this man. Tall, lean, with a limp, Hargreaves said. I saw him only in shadow, perhaps a month ago, before Miss Grayson's troubles began. Holmes dismissed him, turning. To me, a limp, Watson, our new clue. We must search the grounds again, for our quarry leaves traces despite his caution. We descended to the garden, where Holmes examined the area near the gate with meticulous care. Among the rose bushes he found a cigarette stub, its paper marked with a faint monogram M. Not Lillian's, Holmes said, but perhaps our intruder's, a man using her initials to taunt or mislead. The limp suggests injury, possibly from military service. We returned to the house, seeking Miss Grayson in the schoolroom. She was alone. The children dismissed, her face pale but resolute. Holmes showed her the cigarette stub. Have you seen anyone smoking such cigarettes, Miss Grayson? Or noticed a man with a limp about the estate? She shook her head, her fingers tightening on her ring. No, Mr. Holmes, but the feeling of being watched persists. If this man is tied to my mother's vendetta, why does he continue now that she is caught? Holmes's voice was grave. He seeks to finish what she began, perhaps with a motive of his own. We shall set another trap tonight, but first I must confront Lady Clara. Her silence conceals something vital. In Lady Clara's parlour we found her frail and trembling, her eyes haunted. Holmes spoke gently but firmly. Lady Clara, a man with a limp, tied to the 17th Bengal Lancers, haunts this house. You knew Laurence Mortimer and his sister. Is there another from that time, someone who survived to seek vengeance? Her hands shook and tears welled in her eyes. There was Captain James Harrow, she whispered. Lawrence's friend, wounded in battle, left with a limp. He swore to clear Lawrence's name, but I thought him dead. If he lives, he would hate Reginald, as Lillian did. Holmes's eyes gleamed. Harrow, the final piece. Watson, we return tonight, armed and ready. Captain Harrow, if he lives, will not escape us. As we left the mansion, Holmes's face was alight with purpose. The reckoning comes, Watson, he said. A wronged man, a vengeful mother, and a daughter caught in their shadow. Tonight, we end this haunting. Chapter 12. The firelight's reflection, the evening sky over Kensington hung heavy with clouds, casting the Marwood mansion in a gloom that seemed to mirror the weight of its secrets. Sherlock Holmes and I, armed with revolver and lantern, took up our final vigil in the small parlour across from Miss Eleanor Grayson's room. The house was silent, save for the occasional creak of its ancient timbers, but the air thrummed with the tension of an approaching climax. Holmes, his sharp features taut with anticipation, adjusted the luminescent thread he had restrung across the hidden passage's entrance, its faint glow visible only under his specially filtered lantern. Watson, he murmured, his voice a low. Thread in the darkness, Captain James Harrow. If Lady Clara's account holds true, is our man a limping spectre driven by loyalty to Laurence Mortimer and hatred for Sir Reginald? His use of Lillian's initials on the cigarette stub was a deliberate misdirection, but his limp and the regimental relics betray him. Tonight, we end this charade. I nodded, my grip tightening on my revolver. my senses sharpened by the gravity of the moment. The case woven from Lillian Mortimer's recorded whispers, Miss Grayson's nightmares, and a trail of clues from India had drawn us into a web of vengeance and betrayal. The thought of Miss Grayson, caught in the crossfire of her mother's vendetta and Harrow's crusade, stirred a protective resolve within me. At midnight, the sharp chime of Miss Grayson's bell pierced the silence, followed by a muffled cry. Holmes sprang to his feet, his lantern casting a stark beam as we rushed to her room. The door yielded to his key, revealing Miss Grayson standing by her bed, her face pale, her hands clutching the bell. "He was here," she whispered, her voice trembling. The cloaked man, his limp clear in the moonlight. He spoke of justice, of a debt paid in blood. Holmes darted to the bookcase, his lantern confirming the trap's breach. The thread snapped. Luminescent powder scattered. "He moves." With confidence, Holmes said, entering the passage. I followed, leaving Miss Grayson with a maid who had appeared at the commotion. The passage's damp walls seemed to close in as we descended. The footprints, size 9, with a worn heel and a slight drag leading to the attic. Holmes paused. At the narrow window, now firmly latched but bearing fresh scratches on its frame. "He escaped here before," he said, "but not tonight." A faint shuffle echoed from below, and Holmes's eyes gleamed. "He's still in the house, Watson." To the servants' quarters. We descended swiftly, the lantern's beam cutting through the shadows. In the narrow corridor near the kitchen, we found him, a tall, lean figure in a black cloak, his face haggard, a pronounced limp marking his gait. A cane lay discarded, and in his hand gleamed a dagger, its blade catching the light. "Captain Harrow," Holmes called, his voice commanding, "your vengeance ends here." The man froze, his eyes blazing with defiance. "Holmes," he rasped, his voice rough with years of hardship, "you cannot stop justice. Marwood destroyed Laurence, stole his honor, and left Lillian to die. I swore to see him pay." Holmes stepped closer, his revolver steady. "And you tormented an innocent woman, Lillian's daughter, to do it. Your recordings, your nocturnal visits, did you think to break Marwood through Eleanor?" Harrow's face twisted with pain. "I didn't know she was Lillian's child until recently. I meant to drive Marwood to confession, to ruin him as he ruined us. Lillian's plan was mine to finish." Holmes's voice was cold. "You finish nothing, Harrow. Drop the blade." Harrow hesitated, then let the dagger fall, his shoulders sagging. I bound his wrists as Holmes summoned the police, who arrived with Sir Reginald in tow, his face a mask of shock and guilt. "Harrow," he muttered, "I thought you dead in India." "You wished me dead," Harrow spat. "You framed Laurence, took his life, and left me crippled. I survived to see you fall." Miss Grayson, summoned to the scene, stared at Harrow, her eyes wide with recognition. "You were in my dreams," she said, her voice soft, "but I forgive you for my mother's sake." The police took Harrow away, and Holmes turned to Sir Reginald. "Your crimes, sir, will be judged by the law. The ledgers in your study are evidence." Enough. Back at Baker Street, as the firelight danced across the walls, Holmes took up his violin, its mournful notes filling the room. "A tragic affair, Watson," he said, pausing. "A mother's grief, a friend's loyalty, and a daughter's. Suffering all born of one man's greed. The truth is laid bare, but its cost is heavy." I nodded, my pen capturing the final lines. "Miss Grayson is free now, at least." Holmes's eyes were distant, free but marked by shadows. "The human heart, Watson, is a labyrinth. and we have merely charted its edges.